As usual, I get into spoilers with this game, but even more so than usual, I'd recommend going into this thing completely blind and playing through the whole thing before watching. It's only about 2 hours long, and it does some interesting things with its mechanics and narrative towards the end. That out of the way, with the advent of the modern smartphone, the way we do a lot of things is fundamentally changed. We navigate our cars with our phone's GPS systems, we ask our phones for movie show times, we use our phones to cheat at Tuesday night trivia. But smartphones have also changed the way we play video games. Thanks to their always-on internet connection, easy access to your credit card number, and constantly being on or near your person, microtransaction-based free-to-play games have really taken off. Games like Doodle Devil, Draw Something, Tiny Tower, and Facebook variants like Farmville and Sim Social have all exploded in popularity in the last few years. While their specific mechanics may vary, the one underlying theme across all of them is that they're designed to pit your patience against your frugality through energy mechanics. For the 6 or so of you who have never played a game like this, all meaningful actions to progress the state of the game require consuming an energy resource, and when that energy resource runs out, you either need to wait a predetermined amount of time for it to replenish, or spend money to skip the waiting period. It's essentially a way to stretch a usually short, shallow sim out for either dozens of hours or hundreds of dollars, depending on where your personal thresholds lie. Today's title, Little Inferno, borrows heavily from these games. Its gameplay follows much the same formula, borrowing perhaps most heavily from the likes of Doodle God or Doodle Devil. You're the owner of a fancy new toy fireplace in which you burn things. Once an item is burnt to a crisp, it'll drop some money, more money than what it costs to buy. You then take that money and buy more things to burn, unlocking additional items as you go. Along the way, you'll attempt to fill out a checklist of combinations of things to burn at the same time by guessing the needed ingredients from the name of the combination. For example, one of the earliest combinations is called Springtime. You get this by burning an alarm clock at the same time as some flower seeds. Springtime. Get it? Yeah, you get it. These combinations give you stamps that let you get your shipments faster, as well as help you to unlock the next catalog. And the stamps are important because a lot of the game is spent waiting for items to arrive. Early in the game they take 5 to 10 seconds to be delivered, but late in the game they take in excess of 5 minutes. You can use the stamps to skip the waiting period, but stamps are also much harder to come by, so you need to use them sparingly. Because this isn't actually a free-to-play game, the stamps are effectively a stand-in currency for real-world money from the they're trying to emulate free-to-play energy mechanics perspective. While it superficially looks like it's simply replicating Doodle Devil or Tiny Tower without the real money aspect, in reality it's not espousing the values inherent in these mechanics, but instead subverting them. Little Inferno uses its shallow, time-sink gameplay not as a means of wasting your time to make money, but to give a really uplifting message about what it means to waste time, especially when it's so easy to end up stuck in front of a screen for hours every day, especially when we carry those screens with us everywhere we go. There's no denying that the mechanics core to the game are pretty boring. At its best, it's a puzzle game based on trial and error with a lot of waiting for stuff to arrive to pad things out. But first of all, look at what you're burning. Toys that have intrinsic play value? Video game figures from games that have more solid mechanics and meaningful goals? Books full of knowledge, stories, and wisdom? Potentially nutritious foodstuffs and hundreds of dollars worth of technology. All just get tossed into the furnace just to fill out a catalog of items so that you can buy more things to burn to unlock more catalogs to burn more things. You're destroying all of these objects that have some real-world utility in order to feed a game that has no utility and no point. And the game does what it can to make the objects you're burning and the activities associated with them seem dangerous, gross, or ugly in order to justify burning them. Exercise? It's for egotistical, pill-popping meatheads. Dolls and action figures? They're flimsy, ugly, and dangerous. Sushi? That stuff's diseased raw meat. And wine? Only housewives going through midlife crises drink that stuff. So let's burn all of it. The game even references Kyle Gabler's own World of Goo as a dismissively easy-to-beat casual game, which is particularly ironic since Little Inferno itself is simply a grind without any skill involved at all. The idea is that the game wants you to watch complacently as you burn things where your time could be better spent, comfortable in the way the game frames these potentially edifying experiences as evil or goofy or bad or gross.
You know what's more fun than playing with toys? Setting them on fire! With your new Little Inferno Entertainment Fireplace.
Yeah!
The few items that don't have some intrinsic utility tend to be simply outright dangerous or disgusting in their own right, like explosives or insect eggs. They send the message that the outside world is scary, which feeds into the fireplace's sense of self-importance. In the myopic, insular world of this screen, the snowy reality outside doesn't matter. None of the actual value of the stuff you're burning matters, only how it can be converted into unlocks, money, or stamps. And as long as we're bringing up the nature of the fireplace as a single, all-encompassing screen, the fireplace is where the entirety of the burning part of the game is played, and while you're there, you never look away from it. You could dismiss this as simply being what the interface of the game is, except for the huge mechanical twist towards the end of the game. Eventually, you're freed from the game's addictive clutches, and suddenly you're playing a short adventure game, wandering around the world and talking to people. And one of the people you run into is the mailman, who has been delivering and counting every item you've ordered during the course of the game. And, as he points out, you didn't even have to turn around while he gave you packages. You were so self-absorbed in your own little world that the idea that anyone was actually delivering the packages you were ordering didn't even cross your mind. And Sugar Plumps has a dialogue where she asks if you're capable of turning around, whether you can even look away from the inferno. She confesses that she can't, that she could stare into the fire forever but never look behind her. And shortly after that breakdown, that realization that she can no longer maintain a meaningful human relationship, her house burns down and she's freed from the game. While this turns out to be her salvation, at the time it's framed as a bad thing. It's basically implied that she's been killed. But at that point in the game, the player is still inured to Little Inferno. Her loss wasn't felt because she was actually gone. The player never even went looking for her. Her loss was felt because she stopped playing. The whole thing feeds into this metaphor of a myopic obsession with things happening in a glowing screen at the exclusion of the outside world. Now, it would have been real easy for this to have been a snarky, mean-spirited takedown of a genre of games that arguably deserves that sort of response. But part of what makes Little Inferno so damned uplifting is the fact that it's not interested in spewing bile at the things it disagrees with. Spec Ops seemed genuinely angry with its targets, comparing heroes and players of those games to war criminals and serial killers out for self-glorification rather than any meaningful moral end. In comparison, Little Inferno approaches the subject of what games like Tiny Tower and Farmville are, and why you're playing them, with a sense of compassion. It gets that they're just little diversions. It understands the way carrots on sticks can goad users to keep playing. It's not giving a middle finger to games that use those mechanics, it's using those mechanics as a metaphor for lives wasting away in front of a monitor. And by expanding the game's scope beyond simply indicting other games' mechanics, it transcends being just a game about games and turns into a game that asks you to be a better person. Little Inferno repeatedly makes mention of the fact that nothing can go forever. Miss Nancy brings it up in the first few minutes of the game, and she also points out that the town is coming to a slow, frozen end at the game's close. Miss Nancy also ends up running through a list of things she wanted to do, but now finds herself too old to achieve and doesn't know where the time has gone. Similarly, Sugar Plumps is also wistful about how naive she and the player were when they thought they could just burn objects forever in her final message. And when you first meet her, Sugar Plumps hopes to be burning things in front of her fireplace forever. But then you give her a jar of fireflies and she quickly laments the short-lived nature of things you burn. Now, a lot of this could also be seen as part of the game's commentary on a crass and disposable consumer culture, and that's definitely in there.
It's Little Inferno, it's Little Inferno just for me.
But that's not the focus of this video. In the context of the game discussing how to live your life, it serves as a consistent reminder that you're only here for a little while, and when paired with the boring, grindy mechanics, asks, is this really what you want to be spending that time doing? When you finally do meet Miss Nancy, who is responsible for the creation of the Little Inferno entertainment fireplace, she isn't condemned for manipulating people with a horrible game. She's painted as an eccentric inventor and entrepreneur who's out there doing things. She's a dreamer who encourages the now-freed player to also dream, and to dream bigger when those dreams run out. She may have created the time sink of a game that is Little Inferno, but she lives in the real world doing real-world things, and she just wants you to as well. Where they could have just as easily made some jaded Zynga jokes and called the thing a commentary on games, they instead show an empathetic, quirky character who encourages players to take what they learned from those awful mechanics and apply them in chasing their dreams, whatever those may be. Also consider what happens to Sugar Plumps. When you first meet her, she's obsessed, like so many others in the city, with burning things in her Little Inferno. Her text is stilted and camel-cased, and later she says she broke her delete key and sends it to you to burn. She's clearly not capable of taking care of herself, and her manic typing gives an impression of a manic character. But after she's freed from the game, her text takes on a grammatically correct form, and she's far away at the beach getting a tan. The crazy lady who was making friends with bugs, and then presumably tossing them into a fire, is now a well-adjusted woman who is writing to a friend. It's not that her obsession with Little Inferno was framed as evil or bad, but that it was holding her back from doing the things that were truly worthwhile. Finally, the player's own journey is one of moving beyond this empty grind and out into the real world. It's notable that while you're burning things the entire game that have some sort of value, the items that finally free you are the ones that are given to a friend. You're burning items that don't just have some theoretical value, but an actual sentimental value, a combo of items that represent not progress and stamps, but a person you know. Once the player is snapped out of the obsessive clutches of the game, they find themselves in the outside world. It's not as glitzy or comforting, and there's no clear progress mechanics or reward structure to speak of. But the walls that separated you from others like sugar plumps, that kept your vision myopically transfixed on that silly little toy, have been burnt down. As the game ends, the player boards the weatherman's hot air balloon, uncertain where they'll end up, but also sure that for the first time in the game they're engaging the world instead of hiding from it. Little Inferno is a beautiful little art game disguised as a faux free-to-play parody of Tiny Tower or Farmville. It's got digs in at consumer culture, crass commercialism, and bad game design, but above all it wants us to be better people. It's arguably one of the most uplifting games I've played in, well, ever. It's a little saccharine and even a little naive, but I think we need more games that counteract the crass cynicism that seems to permeate everything released these days. And in a season of action-packed sequels with ever bigger integers after the title, having a small indie title not only speak to me, but encourage me to go out and make the world a better place, shows that it's not just the scale of the destruction that matters, but the context and framing you give it.